Hello, everyone, and welcome to our SolarWinds Day. Today's focus will be on Secure by Design. We'll start with an esteemed panel recorded live from Washington, D.C. I will rejoin after the panel and discuss highlights and also our newly published document on secure software development.
I want to thank everybody for coming this afternoon. Welcome to our historic United States Capitol. Appreciate everybody joining us for what I hope is a stimulating discussion on the emerging cybersecurity threat and landscape that our society faces. I'm Chip Daniels. I'm the head of government affairs for SolarWinds, based out of Austin, Texas. And we have with us today 4 exceptional panelists. So gentlemen, we very much appreciate you giving some of your time today for this discussion. Moving around the panel here, we've got Mr. Eric Goldstein, the Executive Assistant Director for Cybersecurity for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, part of the Department of Homeland Security. We have Representative Darrell Issa out of California on the Foreign Affairs Committee, tremendous experience with technology and artificial intelligence, and as he just mentioned, a particular policy focus on the protection of intellectual property. Our President and CEO, Sudhakar Ramakrishna, who's joined us. For those of you who don't know, Sudhakar was named as the next CEO of SolarWinds just prior to our sunburst breach back in December of 2020. Right, and he still came here. And then we have Representative Raja Krishnamurthy out of Chicago, who is the ranking member of the Select Committee on Chinese Competition. So Representative Krishnamurthy, my first question is for you. In your position as the ranking member of the Select Committee on China, how would you characterize the cybersecurity threat that China presents, or really any other threat actor in the globe, and what steps can a democratic society, not a totalitarian society, take to mitigate that threat?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be with all of you, and great to see you, Mr. Issa, and thank you, Sudhakar, for having us. I think superlatives are the only way that you can describe the threat from the Chinese Communist Party with regard to cybersecurity. Astonishing, shocking. 67% of cyber attacks have come from the People's Republic of China. The CCP, I'm just going to refer to them as the CCP. The CCP, according to FBI Director Chris Wray, has a hacking program that's larger than every other country's hacking programs combined. And it's all about stealing intellectual property. And, it's astonishing to just learn about the stats at the FBI. They have 2,000 open cases right now that they are diligently pursuing in terms of open investigations with regard to CCP hacking, and they're opening a new case every 12 hours. What can we do in democratic societies to police against it? I think it's exactly what I think folks here on this panel have been advocating, which is you've got to have a public-private partnership. You've got to have the government working with companies to A, learn about what are the hacks that are happening against them, and then B, sharing that with others so that they can harden their defenses and then prevent future attacks. One very interesting model, I'd be curious to hear about others, is what you're seeing in Ukraine. Okay, the Ukrainians have effectively combated hacking and other cyber attacks by the Russians by basically doing 2 things: radical transparency about the attacks that are happening in the private sector and the public sector everywhere, and then radical sharing, radical disclosure and radical sharing to make sure that everybody can learn from the attacks that are going on. And when you share, you usually get information in return as well. And so NATO, along with the U.S. Cyber Command, has done an excellent job of training them to monitor their internal systems, discover malicious programs, and then cleanse their systems of them, and then look for the next one. So just it's a constant process. So that's the type of attitude I think we need to take with regard to any adversarial regime, whether it's Russia, and certainly in the case of the CCP.
Great, thank you. Representative Issa, you work on the Foreign Affairs Committee, sir. So you're also engaged with China as a major policy area. And I know you've done a lot of work on data and artificial intelligence throughout your career. Can you describe for us how the PRC views data and what is an appropriate posture for the United States to take in response?
Well, thanks for the question, and I think that over and above what's already been said, what we have is we have a disrespect for personal property, for intellectual property, and for the research being done at our institutions and so on at a government level. And when we look at 67% of hacking, the vast majority of the rest of the hacking has a tendency to be very splintered. Organizations that are trying to get specific defense secrets, or someone who's trying to get a particular technology, or quite frankly, bad actors, as we've seen around the globe, but will use Russia as a place that has provided safe havens for them. Each of those lacks the organization that China has. Or China has decided that all of our property should be their property for purposes of catching up and passing. And so that means that whether it's your development of a new drug, or it's a new chip design, or it's a defense weapon, they want to harvest it all. That means that, in fact, you can't protect by protecting one place or two places. You can't protect by protecting our defense structure. And as was said, what we've learned in Ukraine has to become an American imperative, which is that there can't be defense secrets that we keep because we don't want them to know we know. At this point, we're past that. What we have to have is we have to have individuals, we have to have companies, and we have to have the major carriers, meaning obviously the cellular ones we all know, but let's talk about Oracle, Microsoft, Amazon. They have to have the tools in real time to stop that. And by the way, if you're stopping China with 67%, you're substantially stopping the rest. And a lot of that has to happen. And I'll belabor it one more second. We're talking about China, and we're often talking about consumer. But let's realize that China is trying to get highly sensitive defense. In order to get it, they have to at some point take it off of our systems. And our systems have failed us repeatedly when it comes to bad exploitation, most recently an Air Force 21-year-old private. But the reality is that if we put in the systems that in real time, using AI, see patterns and alert, we can stop those kinds of breaches before they get past the first, second, or third download. That works in defense, it'll work in our universities, and it'll begin working even for the individual with alerts. We have to do all of that. And I know we can, but we can't do it unless we have a America-wide solution, one that points to China, but doesn't exclude the rest of the world and the bad actors.
Great, thank you for that. So, gentlemen, both of you did a fantastic job describing the nature of the threat. And Mr. Goldstein, I want to shift to you because you're at the pointy end of the spear of mitigating and dealing with the threat they described, which is tough work. So recently, the Office of the National Cyber Director issued the National Cybersecurity Strategy. What is CISA's role in the implementation of that strategy? It's somewhat of an aspirational document, but now we got to get down to brass tacks. So how is CISA viewing that, and what challenges and obstacles do you expect? And specifically, how can industry help with that implementation?
Absolutely. Let me just first start by thanking Sudhakar and the SolarWinds team for your partnership, for Congressman Issa and Krishnamurthy for your years of leadership in this space, which really has driven our country and our executive branch to increasing heights of capability in countering the threat we're facing. I think both congressmen framed this really well in that cybersecurity is not an abstraction. It's not an intellectual exercise. We are dealing with persistent adversaries with extraordinary resources who seek to do our country and our communities harm. And I'll just reflect on one additive point on the threat we are facing, which is, of course, we know that the CCP is deeply interested in IP theft, for example, but we can also refer to the public version of this year's annual threat assessment, which noted that CCP actors likely have the ability to also execute disruptive attacks on our critical infrastructure. And so the criticality of this moment to driving real change in our country couldn't be more important. Through the National Cybersecurity Strategy, we're really focused on two key shifts, both of which resonate with both congressmen's opening points. The first is this move to persistent collaboration at the speed of the adversary. And what that means is that we need a model where government, where industry, and where our international partners are seamlessly and frictionlessly working together day in and day out to combat the threats that we're seeing today and getting ahead of the ones that we're seeing tomorrow. And if we have any gaps or weaknesses in a collaborative fabric, that's what our adversaries will find and exploit. So at CISA, we've been working to bring together companies across sectors, including major tech providers like some of the ones that Congressman Issa noted, bring them together with our partners in government, NSA, FBI, Cyber Command, and our partners internationally to ensure that we are seeing threats before they manifest on American networks and taking action in response. But we know that's not enough, because the second big shift that's articulated in the national strategy is this idea of shifting the burden. And very simply, this is the concept that we know that given the breadth of adversarial activity we have seen, including through CCP actors, we know that a school district, a small business, a water utility can't defend themselves against a threat of this magnitude. And so we need the government to do more, and we need those tech providers with the scale, the maturity, the competence to do more as well. And so we're working to drive changes in the product security landscape as well, so that if I'm a school district, I'm a small business, I buy a tech product off the shelf, I have confidence that that product is safe and secure by design and default, and is going to hold up against the known condition in cyberspace, which is persistent attempts at exploitation by our adversaries. If we can move to a model where the tech we are using is safe by design and default, and we're collaborating across partners at speed and at scale, that's how we stay ahead of a threat the magnitude of which we're facing today.
So in that response, there's a heavy implication that industry has a role to play here. Sudhakar, so I'll shift to you. What can companies do to become more secure by design or secure by default, as Mr. Goldstein refers to?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you all for joining us today. This is a very important event for us. And it's not just a single event, it's part of who we have become as SolarWinds. The notion of secure by design and secure by default was highlighted a couple of times. And Chip, you mentioned I joined the company just after the sunburst. One of the first frameworks we implemented or supported was secure by design. I personally have been working on some notion of secure by design for better part of 10 years, but the threat surface and the threat actors have become so much more sophisticated that we cannot look at security as an afterthought. That is the deliberate reason for calling it secure by design. So a quick and a loose analogy is you don't think about the airbag in a car after the car is manufactured and on the road. You think about the safety of that as you're designing it. So also, software and industry needs to think about security like quality. You want the customer to get a great quality experience, great user experience, and therefore a great security experience as well. So everything and anything that the industry needs to do to left shift security and do it by design and by default, as you mentioned, Eric, is very, very important. Both congressmen spoke about the public-private partnership, and we spoke about the large tech vendors. Innovation in America happens in enterprises of all sizes. Predominantly, I would argue, in the small enterprise and startup companies. That's how we feed innovation. So this is a whole community vigil activity, as I've always been driving the notion of public-private partnerships. Key amongst this is the complete and transparent disclosure of events. We want victims to come out and say, this is what happened to us, so that we can all learn from us. Unfortunately, the state of public-private partnership does not actively promote it yet. And the reason I say yet is because I'm very optimistic we'll get to that point. But as of today, there's actually a greater incentive for non-disclosure than disclosure. And I think that's an area where we can all collaborate better. And we have pledged transparency. And when I initiated the Secure by Design as part of SolarWinds, we said transparency, collaboration, and humility will be part of who we are. That was a very, I would say, contrarian approach 2.5 years ago. But I'm super gratified that it is no longer a contrarian belief system today, thanks to the efforts of the community. And what can we do to further it and accelerate it is what I believe we need to be doing together.
So a follow-on question then, what you described has cost implications for industry, for business. The auto manufacturers had to figure out how to incorporate airbags and other devices and how that was going to be paid for.
Yeah.
So how do you go about thinking through that as a representative for industry?
So Chip, I'd look at it this way. There is necessary cost, which I call it investment, and unnecessary cost, right? And I believe security is necessary cost as in investing to make a better community and a better experience for all of us. There are a lot of unnecessary costs of not incurring the necessary costs, which is threat actors become more bolder. There is internal focus versus external focus on value creation. And there are defense mechanisms that are not against the adversary and more against ourselves in terms of regulations and the lack of collaboration, lack of transparency leading to significant costs. Because what's happening today is each one of us is discovering the threats independently. And that is simply not a scalable way of becoming more secure. If you think about the asymmetry between threat actors and all of us, let's say as a community or an industry, threat actors have to be right once. We have to be right every single time. And for that to happen, the only way I believe it can happen is taking the step of the necessary cost and collaborating and being transparent.
So Mr. Iser, you have a long career in the technology industry. And today we have video sharing services and applications based in countries outside the United States that may not share the same values that we share. And there's this question about how do we deal with these legitimate businesses, but that could present a significant cybersecurity risk. And how do you balance the innovation that Sudhakar describes, but still do so securely and you don't stifle industry?
But it's a great question, and it's timely. Everyone in America knows the word TikTok right now. And they know it because out of necessity, many entities, including the US government, state governments, have banned from their phones, from their computers, TikTok. That's a very limited patch. It really has little or no effect on the total volume being taken. It's protecting simply a small amount. And so then you ask the question is, does the technology now or in the future, can we have technology that literally protects against that information being harvested and moved to a foreign country? Today, localization would be the answer, except America is already the home of the vast majority of this data. So localization actually forces more and more data to move out of the United States and into other countries who may or may not really share our values in preventing it from drifting to bad actors. So in a sense, that works against us. And I mentioned some of these large companies, but there are larger and smaller entities that host that can and should be encouraged to, and antitrust laws play a part in this, to be allowed to cooperate in the development of standards and capability that would protect from vast mining without without simply saying, well, we're going to ban somebody. If we have to ban TikTok, I'm not talking about requiring that the software not be hosted in China, or certainly, but if we have to ban them because we cannot make sure that that data is not being scraped and used against us, then we failed with TikTok in a way we're going to fail with 100 or 1,000 other software packages. I always use the example that everyone knows TikTok is owned by the Chinese. Do you know that when you go to McDonald's to buy a burger, that's Chinese software? Now, individually, knowing how many McDoubles you buy isn't very valuable. But if you take 1,000 packages of software, all of it seeming innocuous, not necessarily being video, and you have all of it essentially being harvested, pretty soon you can piece together almost any who, what, where, when, and why, including, I use the example, 100 very famous doctors' families are at a McDonald's in a given place. Well, guess what? You know there's a conference and those doctors are there. So you can piece it together with AI. We have to have systems that are smarter than the individual hackers. We're not going to do it by simply locking the borders. That is gone. And so for us in government, we need to reform the Federal Trade Commission so when you have a breach, it doesn't end up with the Federal Trade Commission basically beating you up if you report it. And if you can hide it and get away with it, you're probably better off. Well, that's the wrong attitude. And it's also the wrong attitude to not share what happened and went wrong. Yep. So the first thing we have to do is turn that entity, if you're not deliberate in your failure, from being able to do anything except help spread the word in a positive way. We need to have our antitrust laws be favorable to the kind of sharing that we wouldn't allow with corporate profits, but we would allow with things which are related to cybersecurity and threat. And then lastly, we have to, in fact, create standards for the United States that we want to live under and protections, and then use our foreign affairs capability to send them around to all the like-minded countries around the world. China cannot operate in a vacuum. If Europe has similar standards to us, and we have them, and a number of our other allies, pretty soon, economically, China can't. They may still do it to their own people, but they won't be able to do it to the rest of the world. All of that is going to be essential for us to do in the future. And I think lastly, sort of in, not closing, because I have a little time left, but we have to change our whole mentality for a moment and assume that the whole world is bad actors. Okay, fine, including individuals in this country. But at the same time, artificial intelligence, which is how scraping is going to happen now in the future, is also the tool that will prevent it from being used that way. Today I received not one, not two, but 3 invitations to look at photos from people I knew. At least the name said I knew them. When I looked at the extended, the number didn't match their email account. Okay, that's pervasive. There's no reason in the near future that will ever come to my phone if we put in systems and standards that keep it. And I'll give you the last example. And this happens, and I don't want to bash the Federal Trade Commission because they've been bad for a long time, not just under the current administration. Every one of us that gets that call wanting to know about, whether you want to renew the extended warranty on your car that you don't even have, realizes that we've had a systematic failure, not just in cyber, but even something as simple as robocalls. Can we shut those down? Proving that we can shut them down using advanced AI will be proving that we can in fact take on all these threats in a way in which we stop them. Now, for Homeland Security and the others, we do have one other thing, which is today we don't have a global response in which we punish those who participate knowingly in it. That's a separate issue and beyond the scope here, but it will eventually become the question of, will we in fact have a countermeasure to bad actors, particularly government bad actors?
I appreciate that.
Great points. Chip, if I can just chime in, because the word term AI was used a few times. I do think that we have an edge as it relates to AI as a community, as a country, something that we can leverage liberally, freely, and rapidly to improve our threat defenses. That is something that can be built as a community effort. And there's a lot of really good work happening in the industry about opening up courses for AI and to bring greater awareness, even from a middle school, high school level, as we get into the workforce. That's a very, very important thing. Speaking of community vigil and public-private partnerships, we are all resource constrained. This is going to be, every entity is resource constrained.
Well, not Daryl,
but together, but together, I think there is tremendous resources that we have available. Last year, I was at the RSA with Jen Easterly, and I proposed that what if each one of us, coming from the industry, contributes one full-time equivalent to CISA, to work together as a community and create, let's call it 3,000-4,000 people who are focused on creating best practices, advanced threat intelligence, and competing and sharing that information broadly. We can have the same Ukraine effect 100 times over that you described.
It's almost like a cyber national guard.
Exactly. Exactly.
I think people are hungering for that type of ability to serve, honestly. Maybe it's something we can look into together, because I think that having a cyber national guard corps could be something that a lot of folks can contribute to. I just wanted to pick up on something.
I'll be first in line supporting
You'll be there?
with my FT.
Private first class.
Put you down for 4 full-time equivalents.
Piggybacking off something you said, which is that we've got to now kind of grow a pool of talent that can increasingly populate all these vacant positions for cybersecurity, whether it's at CISA or whether it's in the private sector at SolarWinds. One thing that I've been working on in my 7 years now in Congress is skills-based and vocational education. I think that there's no need to require a 4-year bachelor's degree to be skilled with what it takes to defend against these cyber attacks. And in fact, you know who figured out that we need to invest in skills-based and vocational education? It's none other than the CCP. The CCP has one of the world's fastest growing vocational education programs, in addition to other post-secondary education programs. They have a 5-year plan that they just put in place that's going to turbocharge their vocational education system. We should be doing that here. And while we don't have to have a 5-year plan the way that they do, that's not the way that we operate. We do need to create the incentives to destigmatize skills and vocational-based education, and then create resources so that high schools and community colleges can prepare people for these jobs of the future. In that regard, G.T. Thompson, a member of your caucus, a Republican from Pennsylvania, and I actually helped to modernize our nation's skills-based education system by increasing resources and then taking the strings off with regard to funding from Washington, D.C. So long as you do one thing, you must collaborate as a community college or high school district with local employers to make sure that you have incorporated what is in demand into your curriculum. Because we want people to, at the end of the day, after graduation, get access to the greatest social welfare program devised by human beings, and that's a job. If you don't have a job, you're not able to participate in our 21st century economy. So that's what we have to do with cybersecurity radically at this point. And so look forward to kind of working with Daryl and others on this particular endeavor.
And CISA is a critical partner for us in all of this. I mean, we have mentioned some large tech companies as part of this forum. What's the one thing that's common amongst all of them? They've all been hacked. Not once, but multiple times, and possibly things happening even now. So an over-reliance on 2 or 3 entities is a mistake and is inconsistent with public-private partnerships. And that's where we need to bring the whole community forward and really make it a community vigil and normalize the playing field and not make it an asymmetric game even within our country. And I see more and more of that happening, and I think there are good motivations. Some would call them ulterior motivations, but good motivations for why people behave a certain way. But I do think that with you here, I'm encouraged that we can take it to a different playing field. I'm sure Eric will agree or have a perspective on this at least.
I think that's exactly right. And we know that the companies that are building and designing technology for our country, that is the biggest advantage that we have, right? Because we know how to design technology securely. We know how to design technology that meets the requirement of companies across sectors. And we know how to drive solutions that reduce that burden on individual users, on individual enterprises. The next step that we need to take is just accelerate that transition. We've all mentioned AI a few times. Now it's my turn. AI can help accelerate that journey. But we also know that our adversaries are also going to use AI to make their attacks more effective, their attacks more efficient. And so we are, unfortunately, now in a bit of a race to figure out, can we use AI to advance the security of our systems, to advance our ability to detect threats more quickly? Can AI be more of a benefit to our defenses than they are to our adversaries who seek to use us harm? Because goodness knows, all of our adversary states, China being one of them, are investing huge sums in these capabilities, and we have to move faster, more effectively. But we have the companies in this country, with the support of the executive branch and Congress, we can do it, but we have to do it as a unified effort. If we have seams in our intent, we're going to miss the moment.
Can I ask a question? Is that allowed? Okay. I know you're moderating, but I want to ask CISA, I want to ask you, Mr. Goldstein, a couple questions. One is, one thing that we've learned on the China committee, CCP committee, I'm going to say CCP, is that the state actually incentivizes and almost pays bounties to local cyber gangs to go and conduct IP theft. And so there's something called APT-41 out of Chengdu, China, which has been commissioned by the CCP to go and steal personal identifiable information, and then both sides get something out of it. APT-41 used that information to apply for COVID aid, PPP programs, and they got money fraudulently, according to the Secret Service, and then they provided the personal identifiable information to the government. So that was their version of public-private partnership, if you will. What can we do here? Is there anything that we can do to incentivize? I mean, it's different because there it's like a commission system or something. We're going to commission you. You get a piece of the action to steal some stuff. Is there anything that we can do here to incentivize private actors in the successful defense?
So you're telling me China uses a free market capitalist system in order to incentivize? That just goes to show what works.
What works, right? So I guess my question is, how do we use that to defend against it? Is that possible? Have you seen that happen?
So I think the advantage that we have here is we already have that system where we have everyday private sector cybersecurity organizations who are working hand in glove with CISA, with the FBI, with NSA toward our shared goals. And that is our biggest strength, right? We know that the US government is not going to have deep visibility into cyber threats targeting domestic networks. We don't need it because we can work closely enough with the private sector such that if we are seeing what partners like SolarWinds or Google or CrowdStrike or Microsoft, name your company, we're working with them now day in and day out to see what they are seeing and then turn that around and use it to defend our country, but also to use it to impose cost against our adversaries and make clear that targeting US networks, whether you're a ransomware gang, whether you're a nation state, whether you're a strange affiliate, combination of the two, that targeting American networks is both high cost because our security is sufficient to deter the most common kinds of attacks, but also that we're going to use all levers of power in response.
Can I just throw something out there? Could we set up a bounty system where if you can get into APT-41 and disable them, and take the money back, you get a piece of that action or something. I mean, basically, how do we enlist our nation of incredibly smart people and use a little money as incentive to play offense, private offense? Because I'm not saying we should enlist U.S. Cybercom, because that's a whole other set of authorities. That's like using a nuclear weapon on the APT-41. But I'm saying, imposing costs, that's the part that I'm interested in.
So I think it is our view today that, I had the privilege of sharing a stage at the RCA conference in San Francisco with General Joe Hartman, the commander of Cyber Command, Cyber National Mission Forces. And what we talked about is this flywheel that we're trying to develop, where if we can get information about every cyber attack targeting American networks, and as Sudhakar noted, that is currently a challenge because we currently have limited visibility. If we can get information about every cyber attack targeting American networks, and we can then get that information to those arms of the U.S. government, whether it is U.S. Cyber Command, whether it is federal law enforcement, that then enables them to take action against our adversaries that does impose those costs. And we think that is the right way to bring together the breadth of expertise of capability in this country to get information about who is attacking us and how. Let's take that technical information and let's really make that flywheel where if you target an American company, that information is immediately going to those who can impose costs. And if we do that 1, 2, 3, 4 times, not going to make a difference. If we do that every time at scale, our adversaries are going to seek other ways to achieve their goals, or they're going to seek targets that aren't in our country.
And today there are many bounty programs that we sponsor, the industry
really?
sponsors, including us. But most of the bounty programs are aimed at ethical hackers who look at our software, our code, and highlight issues with us. So that's a step one. That already happens. In fact, the best ethical hackers that I know do not have a college degree and make a bunch of money, some to pay their rent, some to have food, etc. So there's a lot of talent here. What does not happen, Raja, and this is where I think the public-private partnerships have to proliferate even further, is what we learn, we don't share. What others learn, they don't share. And worse, we don't give it to a central authority that gives us the ability to scale. They are only 2 or 3 steps removed from getting to that state, but I don't think our collective will to get it there is just there yet. But the infrastructure, the ability, the motivations are all in place. So that's where I'm hoping both Mr. Isa and you can help us kind of make this more visible.
Well, thank you. In respect of everybody's time, I'll wrap this up. But this has been a great discussion, and I hope it's not lost on folks. We have bipartisan representation here. We have members of the legislative branch, and we have a member of the executive branch, and a member of private industry. And I'm pleasantly surprised at how harmonious your message is. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. We very much appreciate your time. For those of you that serve our government, thank you for serving our nation as well. We do appreciate it.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank
All
you.
right, good.
Thank you.
What an incredible panel. A few things became very clear. We need a shared defense against well-organized and funded adversaries. Shared defense means both low-level details and operating models of adversaries need to be shared. We need to embrace education models that allow more cybersecurity professionals to enter the market. We need to move away from blaming the victims and promote information sharing and a focus on combating the adversary. Vendors have a responsibility to support government and industry security initiatives, and we applaud the efforts for self-attestation required by the end of 2023. With this in mind, I would like to highlight our approach to secure software development, which has been published on the SolarWinds Trust Center. In the published document, we describe our secure software development processes, how it meets the controls of both the executive order as well as the secure software development framework. We are encouraged by the broad support for public and private partnerships we saw from both sides of the aisle and from CISA during the panel. We look forward to continuing to partner with the public sector to combat our common cyber threats. And we plan to collaborate with the technology industry as a whole to make our commitment to the principles of secure by design a standard for all.